All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? So, there's a recent piece of news that I thought was particularly interesting, which is that there were John Deere, I think, tractors that got stolen around the Ukraine area, and they managed to be deactivated. So, this comes here from CNN. So, let me see if I can get this in a view over here and just read a couple of interesting lines from this. So, Russians plunder $5 million farm vehicles from Ukraine to find out they've been remotely disabled. The sophistication of the machinery, which are equipped with GPS, meant that its travel could be tracked. It was last tracked to the village of Zakyan Hurt in Chechnya. The equipment ferried to Chechnya, which included combine harvesters, can also be controlled remotely. Quote, when the invaders drove the stolen harvesters to Chechnya, they realized that they could not even turn them on because the harvesters were locked remotely, which brings up a number of interesting questions. Something that came from my good friend in Nebraska, Kevin Kenny, was, and I quote, do you folks know 99% of farmers have no idea this can happen and would immediately take a sledgehammer to the modem John Deere put in their tractor cab if they knew about this, which is where I come in. Now, again, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to tractors, farming, and John Deere, so I've brought in somebody to join me. Willie Cade, thank you very much for coming on again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, Lewis, it's always great to talk to you. Good work. Keep it up. By the way, I really loved your Apple review. It was great. I love all of them going along. So keep it up.
Thank you. So when you read this article, what's the first thing that pops out to you? Because the first thing that popped out to me is how many farmers in the United States are aware that their tractor could be disabled remotely, perhaps without their permission? That was the first thing that came out. What was the first thing that popped out to you?
Well, first of all, I got to admit, I'm really glad that these thieves slash soldiers got thwarted in this. I mean, it's kind of nice. But the flip side of that coin is how much control that they have, they being in this case John Deere, because they were John Deere equipment, have over the equipment from another owner. I mean, or after they sold it, I mean. And so when I'm thinking about it as a with my cybersecurity hat on, I'm going, oh my God, the control that they had 7,000 miles away, deep into Chechnya. I mean, there's no getting away from this. And so it's like, okay, they've got control of this. What happens if somebody who we don't want gets control of this stuff? What happens? And I'm also then start thinking about, well, what percentage of the fleet in the U.S., let's say it happens in the U.S. And I mean, we've already seen some attacks in agriculture last year at the co-ops. So what happens if somebody decides, this is a vulnerability we should start to really, really press on. And so there's a whole number of ways that I get kind of itchy about this particular story and this particular process. The first one is the actual machines. So it's clear that someone somehow can control and shut down these machines when they want, how they want. Let's just hope it continues to be the good guys and it's never the bad guys. But just hoping is not great cybersecurity. Number one. Number two is how is this controlled? Is it all controlled at one separate space in one particular location? That if that one location is compromised, that they have access to, virtually, a majority of the farm equipment that's out there. Estimates are there's around 300,000 machines that are providing data to John Deere. And that's a public statement that they've made. I think they actually said 270,000. But that's a big percentage of food. And I like to eat. So I don't want anything going on. And I mean, especially now where, Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe is, their planting season is questionable. And we recently had some bad weather in China and the harvest in China is got rained out where in Mandarin Chinese. And Australia's had fires recently with climate change, and we don't know about. I mean, these issues are starting to build up one upon the other. Maybe one or two of them won't make a difference. Maybe three or four won't make a difference. But is it five or six that will really matter? So we really need to pay attention to this. We really need to bring to bear the intelligence and the understanding that we have at places like Homeland Security, it's CISA. They know what they're doing with this. Now, I've done a little bit of work with CISA on them. You may remember I did some work with a guy named Sick Codes a couple of years ago, or about a year ago, on this whole issue, and he did a great talk at DEF CON about the vulnerabilities, et cetera. So, CISA, we really need to kind of upgrade them in our minds as to these are not guys who are just, we need to kind of listen to if it's convenient. We really need to work with them. And I've been just chatting on, so ask some questions.
Yes, I mean the question that I would have is this something where the actual owners of the tractors went back home and did something on their cell phone and were able to disable them, or was this disabled by John Deere? Me having the ability to disable my own products after I purchase them, if somebody steals them, is completely different from the company itself retaining that capability to disable my product after it's been purchased. So, if I can disable my phone after I buy it, like I get robbed, I run here, I log on to my Google account and I disable my phone. That's massively different than Samsung having the ability to disable my phone remotely. So that's the first piece of the puzzle that I'd really love an answer on.
Right. So my understanding from this particular circumstance is this equipment was at a dealership. So it was in the dealership's control and hadn't been stolen yet. But I have heard stories of other equipment being stolen and not sure on the technology there. But I do know that dealers post sale have the ability to look in and control or influence the machine or control it. And as a matter of fact, there's some language in a lease agreement that you have with John Deere if they finance your equipment that says you have to keep this telematics on at all times so that we know where that equipment is at all times, which is okay, I guess, if you're leasing it in their asset. But two, there's some reference in there that's a little bit vague that says, we could shut the machine down on you if you don't cooperate with us. So my assumption here, and it's a pretty closely held secret, but my assumption here is John Deere basically could turn off any tractor. By the way, there are so many vectors of vulnerability with this system that John Deere has put together that I know that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of vectors that a malicious hacker could get in and affect the same kind of shutdown of the system.
Now, another concern that I would have is just when it comes to cybersecurity is, how is this type of thing implemented? Because that some of these tractors are using some of the ones that are a few years old. I remember somebody bringing up they may want to steal the source code, they may want to steal the operating system, and I think it was Kevin Kenny that testified saying this shit runs like an unupdated version of Windows CE. I think that's what he said. It's like I trust me, I don't want your source code to this pile of garbage. And I remember there was a whistleblower that sent an email to Chris Krebs at Department of Homeland Security to raise concerns about a private software technology sharing agreement between John Deere and China, and the main concern there was the national security threat to the U.S. food supply, critical infrastructure supply chain, and how this could be, interfered with. Now, if we're talking about let's say my device connects directly to the tractor via some sort of crazy secure system, that's different than a system where John Deere's tractor is always connected to John Deere servers. I'm sending a message to John Deere servers, and then that is sending a message to the tractor where literally just any random middleman can get in there if John Deere winds up screwing something up security-wise and winds up disabling tens of thousands of tractors around the country. Because That's scary because I don't particularly trust him when it comes to security. I've spoken to Sick Codes, and I recommend people check out his Twitter. He goes over all these really interesting issues with John Deere security and just how much information he was able to grab out of John Deere systems with really minimal work and effort. I do not trust them when it comes to cybersecurity, and I would not trust that they are going to secure the device that I purchase, particularly when it's something that affects the nation's food supply. So if they can turn it off that easily remotely, I'm very curious how easy it would be for somebody else to get into John Deere's insecure system and turn off every tractor in the country remotely.
Uh, Fabulous question. I think one of the things to realize here is when John Deere started building this infrastructure, let's call it a decade ago, maybe 2 decades ago, okay? They really weren't thinking about security and someone hacking it in and I think last year this time was, or a little later in the summer, was really the first time that hackers started to invade the world of agriculture. So the systems that have been developed over time, and I pick on John Deere because I pick on John Deere, but I suspect that all of the other major manufacturers are having the same kinds of issues. As a matter of fact, I know Case IH has as kludgy a system. But my point here is that you can't add security. You can't bolt it on at the end. You've got to build it from the ground up. And somebody's got to knock on the door of John Deere and say, stop. You need to rebuild your entire system in a way that meets a whole lot of security protocols that you are kind of not doing at this point. And so, and I did a little work with Sick Codes and I watched what he did. And I, like you, Lewis, was freaked by what he did and how, and his band of merry men and women. So I think the important message here is, yes, this was used for good this time, but that's what we're learning about so much of the technology is you can do good things with it and you can do bad things with it. And unfortunately, it seems to be that the bad guys will find the most leverage that they can possibly get with this stuff. So, and by the way, I mean, what you were talking about earlier was the trade agreements that John Deere did with China in order to manufacture over there. And in 2015, the U.S. trade representative didn't do a study on was this software of national security interest, because we weren't aware of it at that point. But what that means is that all Russia has to do is knock on the door of their friend in China and say, hey, by the way, can you give us the source code on that? We got a couple of tractors we want to unlock. And yeah, I'm thinking about some retribution and maybe that'll help me. I mean, we know China has it. And I gotta believe that there's a whole bunch of other people who've figured out a lot of what's going on with these machines and are taking advantage of it.
Yeah, like my main concern is like the people are bringing up in the chat. Let's say if there's a way to remotely access it, then most surely John Deere can. I think there's a difference between, let's say, the Tesla mobile app where you're connecting to Tesla's server and then Tesla's connecting to your car versus something like SSHD or SSH where I have a Linux installed on this computer. I can turn on SSHD. Just because I have SSHD turned on my Linux installed does not mean Richard Stallman or Linus Torvalds can get access to all my information in the same way that, let's say, Tesla can when they have complete access to a car if you're using the app on your phone. And if it's more like the latter than the former, then that more concerns me when it comes to being hacked in any sort of way. And there was one PDF that I wanted to put in the chat, but I failed to find. I tried to use a free host and I kind of failed there. That just kind of goes over this from a year and a half ago, where somebody was asking Senator Ben Sass and he included some news articles and citations asking him about this particular whistleblower claim to a member of Department of Homeland Security asking about the relationship between China and John Deere.
Yeah. So, um, I think we are at an interesting point in our lives in terms of actually learning what this technology can do. I mean, for years we've been sold on the potential of it. And there's a lot of great things that are happening. And like any of the great tools of ages past, is yeah, there's a really good side, and oh my gosh, there's a bad side, and we need to learn how to deal with it. And so what this particular story did for me yesterday was reinvigorate me to take a look at, how do we think about this? What do we need to do? And you make a really good point, Lewis, is maybe we no longer want our devices connected to the manufacturer directly. Maybe what we all need to do is we need to have our own connection and decide what we give and what we don't give away. And yeah, there may be a cost to that, but that may be the way that we need to work on this. We can't just default to, oh yeah, they made it, so therefore they get to collect all the data.
Another thing is that one of the things you've talked about in the past is that there are certain people that may want to speak up about certain issues that may not, because they believe that John Deere has the ability to cause them pain. The knowledge that your tractor can be remotely shut down, that's that's something that I imagine might concern some people who may have testified publicly against the company they purchased their $500,000 product from. Because we were on a phone call, and I forget exactly what we were discussing, but you were saying that that John Deere would potentially have the ability to cause some of their constituents severe pain, and like this is one of like I'm kind of curious if there are any farmers in the United States that saw, oh, they disabled somebody's tractor remotely. Oh,
I haven't heard of that kind of a case, but this sure brings it to the fore in terms of possibility. And I know personally of some pretty serious threats made by outspoken advocates of right to repair, with regards to, from dealers about, yeah, I don't know why you want to come to us for service. I mean, yeah, you own John Deere equipment, but I mean, the way you complain, you should just go to someone else. Well, someone else, by the way, is 100 miles away. And that's just not practical. Yeah, Lewis, you'll have to invite me back in a week or two, and I'll talk to you more on that one. So let me just throw that out there. By the way, if there are some people out there who have stories like that, we want to collect them. We're actively collecting those stories where people, like a dealer just says, oh, maybe you want to go find somebody else, or yeah. So whatever it looks like, let's collect those stories. You can go ahead and throw my email up there. You always have. And by the way, one of the things that I love about doing these broadcasts with you, Lewis, is that the comments and the suggestions that people have and the depth of knowledge that your viewers have is wonderful and helpful to me in my work as a evangelical right to repair man.
what's your YouTube channel so people know where to find you?
Deerefacts.com. Deerefacts is my channel. And I've been so busy lately, Lewis, with some stuff in the background that I hope to be able to bring out soon, that I haven't done one recently, but the two that are up there are great. So, and I love the comments that people have given me. It's been very helpful. There I am. Thanks.
Aha. Yeah, very cool. Anything you would like to add or any questions for members of the audience? Let's see. Well, somebody asked, what's your email address?
Willie,
asked.
williecade@gmail.com, just like my name is spelled.
Okay. Let's see. Here, facts. Yeah. It's a great subject. It's a scary subject. The solution could be to get big retailers on board, as it is a potential threat to their supply chain.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, talk about a threat to a supply chain. You know, many of the agricultural products start with this equipment. So yeah, we've got to pay some real attention to this, and you know, John Deere is, for generations, has built fabulous equipment. There's no question about it. We need them in agriculture. They're great, but I think this problem is so big, it's bigger than just John Deere, even as big as they are. And so we really need to up our game on this significantly.
Well, I've included a link in the chat, in the description, to the to a letter somebody had written about a year and a half ago that includes some interesting citations and concerns when it comes to John Deere and cybersecurity with tractors. You have Willie's channel. That's about it for today. And as always, I hope you all learned something. You should check Willie Cade out at Deere Facts on YouTube. And that's it.
Thanks.
Any closing remarks, Willie?
Chat with you.
Any closing remarks, Willie?
No, just, this is great. Keep up the work. People should feel free to reach out either to me. Don't forget repair.org. There's always great information there.
All right. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.